Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. Before we get started, I'd like to let you know that we have interpretation for sign language. We have, if anyone needs interpretation for Spanish, and interpretation for Hmong.
Si alguien prefiere escuchar la sesión en español, se puede poner que nos hable y le damos un aparato para escuchar.
Thank you so much. We are really grateful for all of you to be here to hear your visions, your dreams, your ideas for the future of both Sherman Middle School and Shabazz City High School. We have a team of MMSD folks in the back as well that are here to support. And then we have our architectural firm and our owner's rep firm. But before I get started, I want to make sure that I introduce some of the amazing people that make these schools run every day. So I'm going to turn it over to Principal Thompson, Principal O'Shaughnessy, and Assistant Principal Miranda in the back to welcome you all. Thank you all again for being here.
All right. Well, welcome to Sherman. Our equity vision is Sherman includes and engages every student environment rich in shared academic and social and emotional success. The second part of that is we validate and cherish the collective voice of our students, families, and community. And so I want to wholeheartedly welcome you into the space so that we can start thinking about what the future of Sherman Middle School and Shabazz City High School will look like. I hope that you're excited. I'm not only the principal of Sherman, but I'm a proud Sherman parent. Just getting my feet wet as a Sherman parent. So I also have a couple more that are coming up the ranks that'll experience this space too. So as I know that you're thinking what this is going to look like 3 years from now, I know that our kids are wondering what that's going to look like and how we can really transform education from the bricks and mortar. So I also want to allow some space for my compadre.
Hey, who dresses better? Come on. All right. Hey, my name is Nathan O'Shaughnessy. I'm the fairly brand new principal at Shabazz City High School. And so we're very excited to have a new building to do some of our project-based learning, experiential learning stuff. That's the focus of our deal over there. So, you know, I want to say thank you to the planning team and the design team and the architectural team for really already involving our staff and our students coming up on Thursday, our first official one, in getting their input and their thoughts. So I'm really excited to have you all here because your voice is also important to what our future looks like and how we're able to do school here. And so I know that the staff at Shabazz is really, really excited, not only to have a good heating and HVAC thing, but also the possibility of extending what we do in a better way. So thank you for being here and appreciate your time and your input.
I'll introduce myself. My name is Miranda Salguero. I'm the assistant principal here at Sherman. This is my first year here, but I have a long history of working on the east and northeast side of Madison. I've worked at Sandburg, Lindbergh, and now at Sherman for the last 15 years. And we're really excited to try to imagine how our space allows for possibilities. Anytime that we're planning a building for the future, we're trying to envision what kids might need to learn 50 years from now. And so we would love your input on what you want that experience to look like for our students, whether they're your children, grandchildren, or just your fellow community members who deserve the best that we can offer them.
So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kevin from the Concord Group. He's going to get us kicked off.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin. I'm with the Concord Group. We are the owner's reps working with the facilities department to help manage and expedite the referendum 2024 projects. I know the referendum was passed in November, and you might be thinking, what's been happening? Well, immediately we went and submitted a fairly substantial RFP proposal, interview, contract negotiation phase to find the greatest architects that are skilled experts in education, modern education, and Fortunately, we were able to select OPN, who is based right here in Madison. They understand Madison, they know Madison. They got on board and they started meeting with the facilities and the schools and the teams right away. Then we turned around and did the same thing to find contractors. We interviewed contractors from within hundreds of miles and selected the two best that were right here in Madison. Vogel Brothers is one, Findorf is another. There's representatives from both OPN Architects here tonight and plenty. They'll be leading this meeting. There are representatives from Vogel Brothers. We are here, the facilities from MPS is here. And the idea that OPN is going to take over and lead tonight's meeting will be interactive. We very much value what the community wants this school to be. If there are questions that aren't really directed or answered in the presentation today, the school district has a fantastic Let's Talk program. And so if you go on the school district's website, any page you're on has a little red tab at the bottom. Click Let's Talk, and then you submit your question that can go to, it gets routed through the school to a person, whether it's a facilities member, a teacher, an administrator at the school you're asking about, but you will get a direct response back from MMSD to your questions. It's not an AI bot, it doesn't disappear off, there's no questions unanswered. Faster is the QR code up here, and there's some spread around on the tables, but I think we're ready to kick off the OPN interactive part. Susan, ready? All together.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here. We greatly appreciate it. My name is Wes Reynolds. I'm principal with OPN Architects, one of the owners. I lead our Madison studio. We are extremely excited to hear your voice tonight and hear from you what you think we need to do for these projects, because this is only the first moment for you to share your ideas. But Susan's going to walk through kind of our process, where we are at the beginning phases of design and how to lead into construction, and then the overall phases of the entire referendum. So the only thing I would like to do is, if you're an OPNer, would you mind raising your hand, because these are people that you can talk to from the design team later today. Cody's in the back, so hopefully you've dotted with him. Aaron's over there. So please just talk to us today. That's what we want to hear. Susan, I want to turn over to you to start going through our presentation.
So I'm going to stand over here so everybody can see the screens. But we went through our introductions. Today our agenda is going to talk a little bit about the process. Like Wes said, the schedule. We're going to share a little bit about what we've heard today. We got some high-level concepts to be able to show you about Sherman Shabazz. And then we have an interactive activity to get your input. All right, so as we talk about, I was going to say, am I standing in an okay spot?
Well, I messed up.
Uh-oh.
I tried to be helpful and I was not like you.
But probably have to reset it.
I shouldn't have touched the technology.
We're up and live again. All right, so the diagram on the slide right now shows sort of the design process of a typical project. And so we talk about the very beginning there on the left-hand side is the pre-bond assessment and concept development. So that happens to sort of develop what the project is, to sort of set the stage in terms of this is what it should include. Once we get past that pre-bond assessment and you all voted and the bond passed, we move into programming. So programming is the part of the process where the design team is literally a sponge. We want to listen to everybody involved. We want a diverse cross-section of all the stakeholders, whether it's students, whether it's community, like we are here tonight, whether it's staff, teachers, administrators, building facilitators, as well as maintenance workers. We want to understand everybody's viewpoint. And so we work through programming, lots of meetings where we listen and document what we hear. Then we move into schematic design. And so that's the start of the evolution of the design process. And so during schematic design, we do a lot of ideation. What if this? What if that? Let's look at this. Let's look at that. We sort of take all that information we heard in programming and we start to formulate ideas. They're still very high level, they're very preliminary at that point, but that's where we're starting to formulate ideas. Then we move into design development. When we get into design development, then we're trying to answer all the questions. So we got the ideas, we've heard the data, but now we gotta answer the questions. How does this work? How do these go together? How do these parts fit together? What needs to be beside the other one? But that's what, we're trying to get all those answers at that point. Then we move into construction documents, which is where we're literally documenting everything. At that point, the decision should be made from a design process, and we're actually developing the documents for the contractors, so whether it's the drawing set or the specification manual. And then it moves into construction and procurement. This could be 3 years out here. But you can see these dots running along the bottom. And we wanted to highlight how community input and education, which tonight is the first point of that, post-referendum, they happen along the way. So this isn't your only point of contact with us. And at different points of the design process is where we want to share different pieces of information with you. We're back here right now. So we're sort of at this early programming phase, and so that's why, you know, the designs aren't fixed yet. The ideation really hasn't fully started, but we've been through a lot of programming meetings, and this is one of them in terms of getting input from the community. So as you think about the,
Can I interrupt a minute?
please.
Can you pull down the shade?
Oh, too bright.
Yeah.
How's
That's
that?
fine, that's fine.
Thank you for saying something. So this is a schedule. Was there another question?
I got a question.
Sure.
In this whole process, are you thinking that it's going to be, this building's going to be taken apart? Or are you thinking about building it over in the, what's the playground now?
You're gonna see that pretty soon.
Okay.
So you're jumping ahead a little bit. All right, so as we talk about the schedule, this is sort of the Ref 24 schedule. We got kind of two things happening here, and I know it's a little bit busy screen. But across the top, you can see the years. We went out 4 years. But this purple bar, first bar, is those phase 1 projects. So we are right here where those dots are on top of each other. And the reason those dots are on top of each other, because we're spending a period of time right now, and it's about 4 months, that we are looking at the 5 new middle schools all together. So even though they're not gonna be all built at the same time, we are programming them all together. And if you recall, of those 5 middle schools, the new buildings that are in the referendum, 2 of them, or 3 of them are combination schools. 2 of them middle schools with elementaries, and 1 of them is Sherman Shabazz, which is a middle school with a high school component. So we really have to program elementary, middle school, and high school right now in order to look at all 5 of those schools. So the reason why we're looking at all 5 of those schools at the beginning is because we're trying to work with the district to help them understand a bigger picture. We're validating the dollars. We have our CM partners on board with the team as well. So we're trying to look at the budget and the planning at a high level of all 5 schools before we just charge down the path. What we don't want to happen is we get to phase 2 and money starts to run short, or we misplanned because we didn't look at all 5 schools from the beginning. So that's why you see that cluster of dots right there, and that's where we're at right now. Once we get through that first planning phase of all 5 schools, you'll see the purple, the green, and then the dark blue. So that's the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 schedules. So in May, we'll start with schematic design, design development, and CDs to design the phase 1 schools in 2025. Then they will go to construction. Then in 2026, we will start design on the phase 2 schools, while the phase 1 schools are in construction. So they all overlap as we move through the entire Ref 24 plan. And then in 2027, we design the phase 3 schools. So that sort of gives you an idea of the sequence. The phase one schools will bid in 2026 and start construction. And the plan is then that they open for school at the beginning of the school year in 2027. And then phase two schools open for the beginning of the school year in 28. So this gives you an idea of how the overall schedule works between the phase 1, 2, and 3 schools, and also why we're looking at all 5 middle schools right now as an early planning step. Questions about that? All right. This gives you a little bit of idea of all that data we're collecting. So as I talked about, we want a diverse cross-section of people involved. We want to hear voices through all the lenses. So we're meeting with staff. We're doing programming meetings. We're doing listening sessions. We did some benchmarking trips where we went and visited some other schools to see how somebody else is doing it. Sometimes we learn just as much from what they don't like as what they do like. But we want to make sure we hear that staff input. We're also meeting with the facilities group, and so we're talking to the maintenance people, the custodian people. They look at it through a different lens. How is the building working? What are the systems doing? Is the heating and cooling working the way it needs to? So making sure we hear all that information as well. That's another data point in our process. Here's the community. This is where all of you come in. And so between listening sessions, which is kind of what tonight is, it's a listening session. At some point, there'll be building tours. We also can do engagement in terms where you have to vote. And so needing your input on different things like that, even from passing the referendum from the beginning. But the community is just as important as a voice to hear from. And then obviously with the district. So whether that's student input, whether it's demographics, we're looking at growth around some of the schools. The district is studying sort of where are the hot spots in the community? Where is the next surge of new students going to come from? And so thinking about planning for that, where it makes sense. Obviously, there's financial data. We got to be stewards of tax dollars. So that's an important piece. And then the teaching and learning administrators are looking at the curriculum and sort of how are we delivering. So these are all different pieces of data that are part of our process. So making sure we see all those lenses is very important. So we've had several meetings. We've met with staff. We've met with administrators. We're meeting Thursday with students. We're meeting tonight with the community. But this gives you a little idea of what we've heard. So if you think about overall in school planning and in these education spaces, we're hearing things like we need secure vestibules, right? We need to make sure during the school day, not anybody can walk in off the street and that everybody knows who's coming and going in and out the doors, right? Mobile technology. These carts are a perfect example of that. But making sure that the classrooms and the spaces in the school are set up to support that so that education can happen at any location, essentially. We talk about flexible and adaptable learning environments. Right? These buildings were built in the 50s and 60s. The way they teach today is different than the way they taught in the 50s and 60s. So how can we design a building that has some adaptability? How can it flex depending on curriculum changes or what the future holds that we don't know about yet? And then obviously community space. That's just as important. That's a program element in the school. So helping us define that and making sure that we understand where the needs are when we think about community space. When we talk about middle school specifically, we've heard connectivity, wanting to be able to see each other, wanting to be able to know. It's sort of education on display a little bit. Middle school children are very curious about what they're learning over here versus what I'm doing over here. But if they're doing something innovative in terms of technology or robotics or something like that, you add attention and interest by being able to see it. So thinking about connectivity, thinking about resilient flooring and maintenance of finishes, that's a common one. I mean, the schools can't afford to continue to hire more and more staff. So we have to make sure our materials are wearing properly, so we don't overburden the staff that we already have. So thinking about what holds up the best, what can be flexible. We talked about furniture and technology, the flexibility of it. How can we design a classroom to be both a science room as well as an English room? To be both a hands-on collaborative working environment as well as an art class? I mean, giving schools flexibility of how they schedule their spaces ultimately helps them adapt to changing needs. We can also talk about small group learning. Spaces like this are becoming more and more evident in terms of their importance, right? Giving students that opportunity to collaboratively work together, not just sit at the desk in the classroom. And then student services suites, that's meeting the needs of the students, being available, making sure that those needs are in the right place at the right time to support all. We can talk about a small high school, Shabazz City High School, in terms of they want a very unique identity. They're not the same as a middle school. They're different students. And so they don't necessarily want to be looked at like a middle school, even though they might be in the same building as a middle school. So how can we give them separate entry? How can we give them their uniqueness? How can we design spaces that relate to them? They do a lot of inside and outside education opportunities. So how can we support both and making sure that the building can meet those needs? We also, everybody asks for storage. But when you're doing sort of creative applications, whether you're going outdoor education or that's different storage needs. So making sure we understand what those needs are. And then mentoring in small group space. Once again, that's gonna come up across the board. It may mean different things at different age groups, but it's a need in all the age groups. CTE and Unified Arts is very popular right now. CTE and Unified Arts is all about that hands-on collaborative applications. This is ever changing right now. So what is the right answer? So we design a lot of labs that are flexible, whether they got cord reels in their ceilings, so they can move tables around and desks around to be able to meet different needs. The same classroom wants to be able to support maybe a design studio at the same time as this is a culinary section, right? Doesn't mean it's a full kitchen setup, but that allows a school to do a unit based around foods and culinary. Sometimes they're set up to work around health needs, or they can be focused on skills trades. So CTE and Unified Arts is becoming sort of the hot education moments in schools because they're flexible, but they also support a lot of makerspace applications in terms of materials and different ways of working, not just books and learning environments that are more stagnant. We also heard instrumental, vocal, and general music. So wanting to be able to offer the spectrum of those that are appropriate for the age groups. So having the spaces that support that. And then some sort of a performance element. Now, it doesn't mean these schools are gonna have their own separate theaters. So don't mistake that. But it does mean that we're gonna give them an opportunity to have a performance space. So it could be something associated with the cafeteria or with the gym. We talk about gymnatoriums, right? So there may be a stage element that allows that gym to serve both needs, both an athletic space as well as host a large group for a 7th grade band concert. So thinking about those larger spaces that can support those programs too. And then athletics itself. And so wood competition courts has come up in terms of the gyms being most flexible to servicing both PE as well as MSCR activities. But also thinking about restrooms with changing space. How can we be fully inclusive and making sure everything's accessible to all levels? So thinking about that and access to outdoor fields, that's pretty important when you think about middle school age groups and soccer fields and things like that. There's that storage word.
Storage again?
Yep, storage comes up everywhere. All right, any questions about what we've heard so far? Do you see anything missing?
Was there anything about outdoor learning spaces? I'm sorry, that's my, I need outdoor learning spaces? or-
We've heard about outdoor learning spaces on several fronts.
Okay,
Yep,
great.
yep, and especially here with Shabazz High School. Yep. So this gives you a little bit of idea. You were asking sort of what we were thinking. So this is a high-level diagram, as simple as that. But it lets you to sort of think about how we're thinking about the site and the organization of the site. So the existing school sits about right here. And so the site is still the same, right? The site boundaries are this red line going around. That's not gonna change. But what we're looking at is the new building would go to the east. So, no, to the south, sorry. North is to the left on this diagram. So the new building would go to the south, which would be where the green space is currently. And then ultimately, the existing building will be torn down and that will be converted to the green space. But some of the things that we have to think about when we're thinking about site organization is where is that parent drop-off circulation in terms of cars? Where is the bus staging for the yellow school buses, right? The district has given us how many buses that we need to accommodate at each location. And so we think about, we've had conversations with the city about site circulation and sort of where are those queuing lanes. Shabazz High School also has a lot of students that come on the Metro bus. So we need to think about that circulation as well. They also are drivable age. So there's a little bit of different dynamics here. But trying to take those things we've heard, like the importance of a unique identity, separate entrances as we think about, even though they're both on the north side, but the middle school needs a separate entrance from the high school component. And so how do those work together and how are they separated and both secure at the same time? Did you have a question?
Yeah, where is Sherman Avenue?
Right here.
That's
This is Sherman Avenue.
Okay.
Yep, and this is Redcliffe. So
Yeah.
that's sort of how we're thinking about the site right now. And so just a high-level organization of ideas. Any other questions? Where's parking? So this is showing parking right here. But parking is one of those things that we're still working out with the city in terms of what's the proper count. Several of the existing sites don't have the number of a count that probably best fits their school location. So that's sort of a negotiation as to what's that right number. Nobody wants big parking lots that are unnecessary, but we do have a need to talk about. This just gives you a little bit of idea. This is looking for Sherman. So it's a very loose sketch, but gives you an idea, sort of a two-story building, sort of on that south part of the site. The red recognizes some sort of a welcome center main entry point, as you saw on that site plan, 2 entrances. So Shabazz would have its own entrance separate from Sherman. But thinking about one component being the high school side and how does it have its identity versus the middle school side and its identity. So we're at that early ideation stage. All right. Questions?
So in the profile image, is that more or less like a 2-story profile you're proposing?
Yes, one of the things we're trying to balance is sort of size of building with the footprint it takes on the site. And so most of the schools, yes, will be 2-story. So it's that sort of finding that right spot between taking up too much surface area versus building 2 stories. But with middle school kids, it's pretty common to be 2 stories.
You might not know, but this might be more physical plant, but the area where the field is right now, part of it used to be a ice skating rink.
Okay.
And that there is a drainage that came off. You look like you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, I'm listening.
Yeah, we're
There's-
looking to learn.
There's a place, and on that side, towards Boyd Avenue, where there's a drainage that comes off of the field.
Okay.
Because there's a piece of land that the city owns. And it's part of my backyard. And we've always had to mow it and do the sidewalk and everything else.
Okay.
Now, are they going to, with the new building, are they going to fill that in, or you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well, I think we gotta do a little research, but I'm glad you brought that to our attention to make sure that I fully understand the overlap.
Yeah, because there's a strip of land that we can't buy. You could never buy it.
Okay.
It belongs to the city, and I'm just curious to what is gonna happen.
Okay. So we'll take a look at that, but I don't know that we've been far enough in the design process at this point to be able to answer
Well,
that question fully.
They come out and survey
Correct.
that piece of land.
Mhm.
So they are aware of it. But I don't think the guys that were surveying knew why they were surveying.
Oh, okay. They're probably just checking all the boundary lines. To
Yeah.
make sure they got them in the right spot.
Yeah.
Regarding the strip of land that Linda's talking about, I thought I saw a preliminary plan that showed a driveway in that area that went from Boyd to a staff parking that was like along the current fence. Is that not part of this plan that you're sharing?
Are you talking about
Yeah.
this piece right here?
Yeah.
So you can see currently right now, we're not showing any parking
In
that's
the
directly
ref-
connected off that.
In the referendum efforts, there were some preliminary, just high-level concepts, just to understand the level of scale of building. Those were just a moment in time of just trying to understand the projects, so that's probably what you probably saw that as. That doesn't align with where actually we're more than likely going at this time. So I assume you're talking this little piece right here.
Yeah, those,
We
I
don't
guess,
have a
What
driveway
is that?
through that.
yeah, what is that? Leah?
Well, that's the property line.
Those are the property lines. That dash line just
Okay,
represents the property.
So this red line is the property, correct?
Because right now,
Oh,
this is my house is right here.
Okay.
So that's why I'm asking the question.
Yes. But our current plan right now is that the site circulation happens on both the Sherman and the Northwood side, so it's very similar to the where it is today.
I'm just curious, what's the distance from the property line to the building?
Right here, it's over 100 feet. So, I mean, these aren't final by any means,
Right.
but right now, it's at least 100 feet.
Which side is the main entrance on?
The main entrance is the two red arrows, so on the north side.
So the top side of the red is where the buses would stage,
Correct.
and the bottom is the walking circulation at the bottom for the cars.
Regarding the circulation and what you touched on about the number of buses and things like that, can you say more about that? Because living on the east side, on the Ruskin side of the complex there, one issue, at least in the morning and the afternoons, is that the traffic is pretty heavy and sometimes kind of dangerous. I mean, there's a surprising number of parents who will drop off their kids and then take off at 40 miles an hour down the road. So I mean, in the work that you're doing, are you able to think about traffic calming or things like that to keep that under control?
Traffic calming is one thing. There's also part of the way we're evaluating the sites now too, is to separate that bus and car drop off. Currently on multiple sites, it's happening at the same point, right? So it's overlapping, which is creating an unsafe environment. Currently though, the buses queue along Ruskin. All of our sites, we're trying to bring that loop internal to the site. So you're not dependent on the curb as that point. So there are different things like that we're thinking about in terms of how we're working with the city to be able to navigate these sites better from a safety standpoint of site circulation. I would not say the solution is going to be the same at all of them. So looking at them individually, but those are some of the things we're exploring right now, is getting off the curb, trying to separate the cars from the buses so we can create a safer environment for all.
Thanks.
Talking about circulation, I have kids who have to cross Sherman. Would there be any sort of crossing guard, or would that flashing cross point maybe move to Logan? Has that been considered?
Moving the flashing cross guard to Logan has definitely come up. So, I don't know that, like I said, we're not far enough in our design process to know all the answers, but yes, definitely that has been talked about as we think about where those drop-off points are at.
Cities engaged as well.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing the plans, they look great. My question.
Sorry,
my
make sure I can hear
is,
you.
I live on Ruskin, so it's more of a practical question. So when it comes to the construction time, I live literally like, I guess, 20 foot on the proposed construction site. So I'd be interested in hearing in what kind of work you're doing to mitigate some of the disruption to the local community, like vibrations, noise, and dust. So will there be construction on the weekend, for example, into the evenings? What is that going to look like?
I don't know that we have all those answers yet. I mean, we're a year away from actual construction physical, and I think those will be topics that will be discussed at future community input sites when we know a little more about phasing, and we can start to talk about circulation and site management during construction, right? It's still gonna be a school operating on the site when the new construction is happening. So there's a lot of logistics to work out in terms of school circulation, construction circulation, and how those two sort of cohabitate for a year and a half. So there'll be a lot more to come on that.
That's what I would have said, there's more to come, so no, that's, we want to work with the community and the neighborhood to be respectful and work collaboratively with you.
I live next door to East and Findorf did a great job for the years that they were under construction. It was very much like a 9 to 5. Some of the time there were some loud cranes in the morning. And they worked through the summer, obviously, but I thought Findorf did a really good job. We literally lived in the parking lot, so we had cranes in our backyard all the time, and you knew there was construction, but it didn't feel as disruptive as I thought as I did, so they did a great job. If they site manage like that, you will know there's construction, but it won't be in your face. Some early morning cranes at 6 a.m., but those are fun.
And keep in mind, Vogel is listening, they're the ones assigned to this facility.
Talk to Findorf, they did a good job.
So I told them no pressure.
You learned it all from us.
They're gonna be held to, like, you mentioned dust. There's dust mitigation strategies that they won't be able to avoid them out to water, some other strategies. But yeah, if they start making construction dust that's blowing over the neighborhood, you'll probably be the second one on the site to talk to them, probably not the first. So they're good.
Before you go away from the building, so has there been conversation about the greenhouse for Shabazz?
Conversation in what way?
Because there was a plan before all of this that Shabazz would have a greenhouse. So is there been conversations about the integration of that into the building?
As we work through our programming meetings, it has come up. There's been no conversations in terms of what's the definite plan yet. We're not that far enough along, but it has come up in the programming.
And then there's a building that's pretty new, that's the van and the storage. So would that get moved or integrated, or is that too early?
We're too early to know exactly, but we're aware of the building and we have no intention of getting rid of the building.
Because
So
it's really new.
yes.
Right.
Yeah. We've heard about the building. Yes.
Oh, there's one behind.
No, go first, you're up first.
I noticed that when you said what you've learned so far from both groups, you talked about separate entrances. And so I wanted you to clarify, are we talking about entrances for everything or in the school? And the reason why I ask that is, given that these schools are going to last for many, many years, maybe over time, the use of the building changes. And I understand that a high school, middle school combination might look different than, say, an elementary middle school. But given the state of current school finance, I wonder about understanding separate student entrances, but distinguishing between once school starts, can there not be one entrance that's dual staffed, or that it allows for some sharing of staff, so that we don't have to staff two of those? Because you just don't know as we continue to get poor state finance. So I would ask you to think about distinguishing between student entrances, like when kids are coming in the morning versus once school starts. And just along with that idea, we have a long history of sharing spaces and how we work with staffs to really embrace the sharing of spaces. How we make sure that that there's flexibility in the life of the school, that one school may grow and need some additional space. How do we change that in a way? And you could see like Shank Whitehorse are not well designed to do that, but for instance, Toki Orchard Ridge, there is more flexibility there. So how you can design it so that there's some flexibility, not only in the types of spaces, but who's currently making best use of that. I'm very happy to see a couple of things. And one is the community use, and two, that you're looking at safe transportation to and from. But I haven't heard bike path or pedestrian in that conversation. I've heard bus and parent drop-off, and how we work with parents that, you can walk a few blocks, you don't have to be driven.
Correct, correct. And those are all things that have come up in our programming, and we haven't solved all the site items yet. So don't feel like it's not included, even though I didn't highlight bike and pedestrian specifically. But just like the conversation about the crosswalk and the safety way of getting across Sherman Avenue, those items have come up in our conversations with traffic, with the city of Madison, and make sure we are thinking about all arrival gathering points to the site. One thing that I didn't highlight that I could mention is also thinking about the school building outside of the school day. So we're also thinking about security and how the entrances work for before and after school events or weekend events. Not adding more entrances, but how can those entrances do double duty, and how do we secure parts of the building? So if you're here for an activity on a Saturday, you're only limited to this part of the building and you can't actually get into the school part. So that's all part of modern design with schools now that you'll start to see more and more of as we move further into the design process. Sorry, we have one back there.
There's been a lot of building in Dane County, right? Wanakee just built a new middle school, Sun Prairie built 2 new high schools, and middle schools are within the past 2 decades, and Verona built a new high school. Are we reaching out to those folks to ask them, Wanakee built this and they said, we can't, our vestibule isn't working. Verona has like, hey, this didn't work out for our gym, and I know it's a high school, but that can be applicable. So how are we reaching out to people that have already done this and getting the best?
Yeah, we've done some of that research.
Okay.
We've also done some benchmarking in other, not just around this region, but other regions, Milwaukee area, Green Bay, Sheboygan. And they kind of, don't do this.
Right.
So right in the beginning,
Right.
don't do it.
Right.
So
Or
they
like,
kinda
who
give
has,
us-
who has the vestibule problem figured out? Who has the outdoor, who has those things? Okay.
We had a great tours. We're like, this is great to look at, waste of money.
Right.
No one's ever gonna use it. We're like, Jack, don't do that. And so we had a really good last, like 2 weeks ago, last week, we did it for 2 full days. We got some all new spaces.
Great.
And really got to know the nuts and bolts of, this is beautiful, but don't pay the dollars for it.
Okay.
Never gonna use it. The kids don't like it. We tried it different ways. The approach isn't right. Focus more on the classroom, putting more into the classroom, more technology or whatever that is, and that's the best bang for the buck.
Good. And our architects have done a lot of these schools. Our contractors may have done one of the ones you just mentioned, and we can talk about it if you wanted to.
But you're bringing up it's an absolutely
Just to
great
make sure
question.
that-
We always
yes.
want to learn and make it better. Yeah.
Learn from the neighbors.
You said that on the picture that you had about the 2 entrances are next to each other.
Correct.
Does that mean that there's going to be a wall between those 2 entrances? So one side is middle school, one side is Chabon?
They're actually divided by more than a wall. There's spaces between them. So
okay.
as you come into the welcome centers on both sides, they're not directly open to each other.
Okay.
So thinking about the influx of students as they're coming in and sort of where are they going in the building versus the other students, so they're not all mixing, they're also not all trying to cross paths at the same time. So there's a bunch of studies right now with the circulation inside the building as you come in those entrances. So even though they look like they're side by side, they're really further apart than you think. All right, so questions can keep coming, but let's move on. So we have we have activities as 2 questions that we want all of you to answer. Okay, so over here on this side of the room, we have stations set up. All the stations are the same though, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't matter which station.
Oh, no, sorry, they're in various languages.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I answered too quickly.
You can either enter the QR code that's at the top of the screen, because you can do this digitally. So if you have your phone, you can scan the QR code and answer the questions digitally. Or we also have paper and pens over here if you would prefer to answer that way. But we have 2 questions.
One is, a Madison school is.
And answer the question. So I guess it's not a question, it's saying a statement. A Madison school is ... And we want you to fill in that blank.
Oh, and then the other one is what should it have? So the first one would be getting at, like, what does a Madison school embody, right? It's less about what spaces might it have, but it's like, what does it embody? What does it represent to you? And that is whatever lens you particularly have. And then the other one is more of you can think of it more about a physical space. Like, what does it have? What does it provide? So, and I'll work on these. So you might have this option here too, but for right now.
As you answer those 2 questions, we are all here. So feel free to come up and talk to us. We can help answer your questions if you have more. But we would love your input, because that's going to be another data point in that programming process that I outlined. Okay?
Is there anything left in the presentation after those, or that's that?
That's the end.
Okay, great, thanks.
That's the end. And if you didn't dot the sheet when you came in, please add your dots to the sheet at the entrance.